Most of the newsroom lights were off. Only the pale blue glow of the monitor spilled across the steel desk. Outside, New York refused to sleep. The wail of an ambulance on 8th Avenue rose like the city's familiar lullaby, the kind no one truly hears anymore. I sat there among a scatter of papers, a cup of cold coffee beside me. The investigation titled The Donor Files was nearly done. It had taken 6 months to gather those documents, irregular medical funding invoices, redacted testimonies, and the words of a whistleblower who'd once cried as he told me they're trading patients for stock shares. Everything was stored in my private folder, CM Monroe Files. Only I had access, or at least I thought I did. At 11:42 that night, a small notification blinked in the corner of my screen. New login detected. User, CM Monroe. Network, executive. I froze. The reflection from the monitor turned the coffee in my cup blood red. My account was being accessed from the executive floor? Impossible. I opened the internal log. The IP pointed to room 32A, a section reserved for senior leadership. At that hour, only one person could be there, Ethan Vale. His employee badge was still new, but everyone knew who he was, the CEO's adopted son. Just last week, he'd been introduced at the company meeting as head of digital strategy, a position 12 others had spent 20 years trying to reach. He'd stood there and said news should be fast, clean. People don't need the raw truth, they need belief. The room had gone silent. I remember the soft clatter of a pen hitting the table. I didn't argue. I'd learned that sometimes silence shakes the room louder than words ever could. But tonight, silence wasn't an option. I took a sip of bitter coffee and opened the activity monitor. Lines of code appeared, pulsing like the heartbeat of a thief creeping through my files. EV access. Folder. CM Monroe. Files. Copy initiated. He wasn't just logging in, he was copying everything. For a moment, my hands trembled, not from fear, but from fury. Not the kind that makes you shout, but the cold kind that settles deep in your bones, the kind you feel when someone steps on years of your work and calls it improvement. I thought about my investigation, the evidence from hospitals, the workers who'd risked everything to tell the truth. If Ethan got those files, he'd twist them, reshape the story, and air a sanitized version for the sponsors. The truth would be replaced by something easy to swallow, a rebrand of reality. I set the coffee cup down. The soft click against the metal table sounded like the end of a sentence. Then I smiled. The kind of smile that means a plan has just begun to take shape. I didn't call it, didn't send an alert. I just watched the screen light flicker on the glass wall and whispered to myself, if he wants to see, I'll let him see. People like Ethan believe that access equals power, that having credentials gives them the right to redefine right and wrong. They never understand that seeing the data isn't the same as understanding the truth. I opened the folder again. File names appeared one after another. Donor/tape 011.mp4. Report/draft/final.docs. Funding records/Q3XLSX. Documents are powerful enough to bury a corporation if used the wrong way. I stared at those names, then at the blinking router light. In that moment, I realized I didn't need to stop him. I just needed to lead him exactly where I wanted him to go. Every precise act of revenge starts with a calm smile. And that night, I smiled alone in the quiet newsroom, surrounded by the faint light of the city and the wind brushing the glass. New York was still loud outside, but inside me, there was only silence, the silence of someone who's just figured out how to beat a liar at his own game. I shut down the monitor, stood, and turned off the last light. On the desk, the on-air sign glowed red, pulsing like the slow heartbeat of something waiting to be broadcast. As I walked to the door, I thought about the CEO's golden boy, a man raised under studio lights, who never learned what real light costs, a man who believed every truth could be edited. He'd just opened the door to my world. Too bad it wasn't the door he thought it was. I smiled again, a smile only I could see. Then, under my breath, I whispered, "Tomorrow's going to be interesting." If you've ever worked with someone who thought the rules didn't apply to them, tell me, Where are you watching this story from? The morning after my account was stolen, I arrived at the station earlier than usual. The first light of day streamed through the glass windows, catching on the dark screens and scattering silver reflections across the room. Like the building itself was wondering what lie it would tell today. The air smelled of coffee and ozone from the printers. GVN always felt this way. Noisy, charged with fake energy, full of people who believed they were creating a new kind of truth. The morning meeting started at 8 sharp. The conference room on the 10th floor overlooked the Hudson. Sunlight poured through the glass, splitting every face in half, one side bright, one side shadowed. Ethan Vale sat at the head of the table, white shirt flawless, silver tie perfectly knotted. He had the calm arrogance of someone raised to believe failure only happened to other people. Beside him sat Douglas Vale, CEO, adoptive father, once hailed as the torchbearer of honest journalism. Today, that torch looked close to burning out. Ethan smiled like the whole room was his stage. Shall we begin? No one answered, but everyone straightened in their seats. GVN needs a new direction, Ethan said, voice steady and clipped, every syllable measured. Audiences today don't want to be taught. They want to be comforted. He pressed a remote. The big screen lit up, showing a chart labeled Viewer Trust Index. This, he said, pointing to the red line plunging downward, is when we air investigative reports. And this, he said, tapping the blue line that soared upward, is when we run talk shows or lifestyle news. People laugh, they share, they engage. Engagement is up 64%. He turned back to us, smiling, a mix of performance and challenge. We don't sell truth, we sell trust. No one clapped. A few young producers took notes like disciples at a sermon. The rest of us just watched in silence. For me, that sentence cut deep. Not sharp enough to hurt right away, but deep enough to leave a scar. Then came the part about modernizing content. In Ethan's vision, every anchor script would be rewritten to sound friendlier. Every word like investigate would be replaced with evaluate. Every unverified clip would be cut, because, as he said, audiences don't like uncertainty. News is a product, he added, and anchors are brands. It sounded more like a marketing lecture than an editorial meeting. When the slide changed to the donor files, his eyes flicked toward me. Your report, Clara, he said, is strong, maybe too strong. I think we should make it easier to digest. I'll be reviewing all narration before broadcast, just to ensure balance. A young editor asked quietly, Since when does digital strategy approve content? Ethan shrugged. Since the audience decides what's credible, I looked straight at him. There was no malice in his eyes, just the quiet confidence of someone who'd never been challenged long enough to doubt himself. That kind of person is the most dangerous in this business. When the meeting ended, I walked past his office. Through the frosted glass, I saw his screen glowing, folders open everywhere. One of them stopped me cold. Clara Monroe files. He was laughing on the phone, saying, Don't worry, I'll make it look brighter. My father will be proud. I stood there for a moment, then walked away. No words, no reaction. Because people who step into restricted ground rarely realize they've crossed a line until the floor collapses beneath them. Back at my desk, I turned on my computer. The message was still there, frozen like a warning. Last access, 11:42 p.m. I opened a new note and typed, Monitor access behavior, no direct confrontation, redirect the flow toward me. Then I saved it under a neutral name, Plan Ether docs. No one would notice. At GVN, hundreds of files like that were created every day, but only a few could change the entire system. That afternoon, Ethan's orders rolled out. All scripts had to be submitted through the new auto-approval platform. Every investigative clip would pass through the Ethan filter. From now on, every line had to sound balanced. I reviewed my report after it passed through his filter. My line, saying a series of suspicious transactions between a pharmaceutical giant and a charity organization, had become a few controversial activities currently under clarification. The word suspicious was gone, and with it, the soul of the story. I played both cuts side by side on the screen. One raw, heavy, painfully honest. The other is clean, bright, and hollow. I muted the sound, watching the whistleblower's lips move without emotion. The only thing left was Ethan's soundtrack, light, hopeful, false. I wrote in my notebook, he hasn't just crossed the line. He's rewriting me, one sentence at a time. Then I closed it. Because one day, the truth always restores itself, like an original file accidentally overwritten. And when that happens, I'll be the one pressing restore. I called Leo at noon. Are you still in the tech room? Yes. Are you okay? I need my access logs. Last night, 11:42, and everything related to the CM Monroe files folder. My voice was so calm that even I found it strange. Leo's room sits on the 6th floor, always cool like a server cabinet. He booted up, and his fingers flew across the keyboard. Here it is, Leo said, enlarging the screen. The line read, User, CM Monroe, Source, Executive Network, Device, EVMB Pro 32A, EV. Leo raised an eyebrow. Ethan Vale? I nodded. He pulled more data. Mirror sync. Copy. CM Monroe. Files. Exec shadow / eval / backups. I stared at the screen. Commands as cold and deliberate as plotted evidence. He didn't just log in, Leo said. He mirrored the entire folder, including metadata, drafts, emails, and original footage. He opened another window. The list of copied files. Emails / interviews, drafts, raw footage. I saw names that felt like my own blood. Tapes where the whistleblower trembled, saying I don't want anyone to know I said this. Now they sat on Ethan Vale's drive. Hash checks matched, Leo whispered. Bit by bit, not a single byte out of place. I leaned back, hearing my heart slow. Not exactly anger, more the realization that a line had been crossed. For real. Are there cameras on floor 32? Leo played the footage. Ethan walking into the room at 11:39, plugging in his laptop, the monitor light washing his face, a confident, young, arrogant smile. He did not know that the smile had just scored the first crack on the surface of the pond. I told Leo to open the destination folder. Besides CM Monroe files, another folder appeared. CM Monroe files edited. Open it, I said. The first file, report draft from final / rev doc x. My words had been altered. Accused of bribery became alleged errors. A fake funding program became a charitable health initiative. My investigative piece was being turned into a positive PR campaign. I read 2 paragraphs, then smiled. Not a happy smile, but the smile of someone who knows an opponent is confident enough to walk into the trap. Leo looked at me. What are you going to do? Not stop him, I answered slowly. Redirect him. He looked up. Create a folder called CM Monroe / backup. A replica that looks real but with small intentional differences. When Ethan's device accesses it, the system will automatically route him there. Fake files? Leo asked. I shook my head. Not fake. A mirrored version. Let him see the truth the way he prefers. The mirror will give him the exact image he expects. Leo was silent for a beat, then nodded. Technically, I can bind his machine fingerprint. If it's EVM Pro 32A, it will hit the reflected version. Your account will still show the real data. Good. Add a metalog, a hidden record only I can see. I want to know every time he touches it. And the mirrored content? 98% identical. 2% off, in the right places. I looked at the screen. Voice. Cold. Enough to make him reveal himself. Leo typed fast, the blue screen light reflecting on his glasses. Done. The system will treat CM Monroe backup as the primary when accessed from the executive floor. And Metalog is active, I nodded. Thank you, Leo, he smiled faintly. Are you sure? If this blows up, I know, I cut him off. And that is why I need every digital fingerprint. You stay quiet. I left the tech room. Under the white corridor lights, my reflection moved beside me, pale but steady. Back at my desk, I opened planether.docs and added 3 lines. Metalog on mirror. Root, active phase 1, complete. I paused, hand on the keyboard. From down the hall, I heard Ethan laughing in the meeting room. I drew a long breath and whispered so only I could hear. You want the real files? I'll give you the real files, on my terms. The IT room was cold like a laboratory. The hum of the cooling fans mixed with the clatter of Leo's typing. The glow from the blue monitors reflected off the glass wall, cold and still. All right, he said. I've created a parallel directory, same name as CM Monroe files, same permissions, same creation and edit timestamps. The system will recognize Ethan's device, EVMB Pro 32A, and automatically redirect him there. If he accesses it, he'll think it's the real one. I nodded, eyes fixed on the screen. Perfect. The mirrored files began to form, identical down to the pixel, with tiny deviations only a journalist would notice. An interview date shifted from the 12th to the 10th. A financial chart flipped its profit margin. A secondary name was swapped with a PR manager from the sponsor's side. We weren't distorting the truth, we were bending it just enough for it to reflect itself. How's the autosync? I asked. Leo replied without looking up. When he downloads the folder, the system pushes the mirrored version automatically. Each file carries a hidden watermark and separate metadata. No one will notice unless they verify. Good, I said quietly. Let him take exactly what he wants, a version he can control. Leo paused for a moment. Aren't you afraid he'll find out? I smiled faintly, just at the corner of my mouth. I'm only giving him what he came for, a counterfeit version of truth. I looked at the screen, watching the list of the donor files replicate. Drafts, raw footage, emails, financials. Everything my team and I had worked on for 4 months is now copied into illusion. It was a strange feeling, to be a journalist creating deception in order to protect the truth. What kind of watermark do you want? Leo asked. Hidden in the metadata. Only someone verifying the real data should see it. He typed quickly, then said, I've also added a metalog. If Ethan opens, moves, or edits anything, the system will record each action. It'll be undeniable proof. Perfect, I said. Like a fingerprint, one touch, and it's there. We tested the files. The video played normally, the whistleblower's voice trembling, but the timestamp was off by 2 days. In the Excel sheet, ROI increased by 10% because a formula had been inverted. In the notes, a single letter was used in a different font, only visible to someone who truly looked. I also added a fake email in the thread, Leo said. Looks like an internal meeting summary, but it doesn't exist. Anyone skimming will believe it's real. Good, I said. Liars always trust the details that make them feel clever. I sat beside Leo, watching the twin folder trees appear on the screen. 2 parallel worlds, one real, one false. They mirrored each other perfectly. Same headlines, same tone, differing only in integrity. A strange calm settled in my chest. Not fear, but a cold steadiness. I'd always believed journalism was about bringing light into darkness. But maybe sometimes you have to build a mirror and let others see their own shadows. Leo hit enter to execute the command. Done. The system now recognizes Ethan's device. The moment he logs in, the autosync will trigger. Every move he makes will be logged. I watch the lines appear on the screen. Mirror active, autosync on, metalog enabled. It felt like locking a box, not with a key, but with the certainty that the thief would open it himself. How long before he downloads everything? I asked. If the connection's good, less than 3 minutes. I smiled softly. 3 minutes to step right into my trap. On my way out of the IT room, I stopped by the glass wall overlooking the lobby. Ethan was stepping out of the elevator, laughing with his assistant, phone in hand, every move relaxed. He had no idea the drive he was about to access had been designed to reflect the way he saw the world. Beautiful, polished, and wrong. I pulled out my phone and opened the Metalog app. The screen displayed, waiting for device EVM Pro 32A. I locked the screen and exhaled. The game has begun, I murmured. That night, I stayed late in the editing room, the yellow light spilling over the keyboard. Next to a cold cup of coffee, I added a note to plan, ether, docs. Phase 2. Observe. Do not interfere. Truth always surfaces. Then I closed the laptop and leaned back, listening to the rain against the window. The sound merged with the blinking lights from the building across the street, where the executive floor was still awake. I closed my eyes, picturing Ethan's face tomorrow morning as he walked into the office, certain he held the exclusive evidence. Only it didn't exist. I whispered softly, like leaving a message to the night, "See you tomorrow, when everything comes to light." The executive lobby blazed with light, as if the entire network was trying to see itself. Posters reading "Partners in Transparency" lined the hall, but everyone knew this meeting wasn't meant for the public. I arrived 15 minutes early. A PR assistant adjusted microphones, and someone set down glasses of water. The air smelled of coffee and fresh print, a scent that always meant someone was about to lose. The main conference room was built like a studio set: LED walls, a long glass table, tall black chairs. At the center sat the empty seat of CEO Douglas Vail. The one to his right belonged to Ethan. He entered at 9:58, navy suit, silver tie, that same broadcast-ready confidence, unaware the screen behind him was about to show his own distortion. I stood by the coffee counter at the back of the room, far enough to observe, close enough to hear the tension breathe. Douglas nodded once. "Ethan, begin." The GVN logo flashed with its three-note chime. Ethan smiled. "Thank you, everyone. Today I'm proud to present the updated version of the Donor Files, a modern, more uplifting story that aligns with GVN's new vision. The first slide, overview. Everything gleamed. Corporate blue palette, clean sans serif font, text aligned to perfection. The second, interview timeline. Circular markers appeared on screen and I saw it immediately. June 10th, 2 days off. Only I and a few others in the room knew it. A man at the end of the table, the lawyer for a major fund, raised an eyebrow, said nothing, but made a note. Next slide, financial chart. The ROI curve shot upward like a rocket. Ethan said, "The positive impact is clear, based on operational data and internal surveys." A woman with short hair and glasses, the finance rep, tilted her head. "You said internal surveys. Which department provided that data?" "Strategy, and I compiled it," Ethan replied. "Strange," she said, "because last quarter's report shows an increase in expenses, not profits." Ethan hesitated. "I excluded outliers to make the chart clearer." "Excluded outliers," she repeated, voice even. "You mean you deleted the real data?" The air shifted, temperature dropping. The next slide rolled, quotes from the whistleblower. His trembling voice filled the room, but the timestamp in the corner read June 10th. One investor tapped his pen, eyes fixed on the screen. They understood that the date broke the chain of legal evidence. Ethan kept going, tone steady, rehearsed. "We chose a gentler narrative to avoid making viewers feel accused. Stories should inspire, not inflame." A hand went up. Alex, an old investor rarely seen at meetings like this, leaned forward. "Sorry, but what exactly are we looking at?" Even the air conditioning hum seemed to stop. Ethan frowned slightly. "I'm presenting the optimized version of the report, trimmed of unnecessary weight." "No," Alex cut in. "You're showing us a presentation with reverse figures, wrong timestamps, and altered terminology. What is a charitable health initiative?" In Monroe's original, it was Funding Foundation. Why the change? Ethan tried to hold his composure. "We just wanted to emphasize the positive message." "Positive message?" Alex's tone hardened. "In investment, we call that data manipulation." A soft cough echoed from the far end of the table. All eyes turned to Ethan. I simply raised my coffee cup. Douglas stayed silent, fingers interlocked. His silence weighed more than any reprimand. Ethan clicked to the final slide. Case study. Images of a medicine stockroom, revenue charts. I noticed the faint watermark Leo had hidden. A pixel of altered hue, visible only to those who knew. "Here," Ethan said, "is proof of measurable improvement. The positive impact is clear." A donor leaned back and said quietly, but everyone heard, "Clear?" I'm seeing two timelines, conflicting results, and an Excel formula that doesn't match my copy. Care to explain? Ethan froze. Douglas interrupted, voice low. Ethan, where did this data come from? From Clara's folder, Ethan answered too quickly. I set my cup down, said nothing. Douglas looked at me. Ms. Monroe, did you authorize this? He didn't need to, I said evenly, but I can confirm my folder was accessed without permission last week. Heads turned. The room fell silent except for the faint hum of the vents. Douglas faced Ethan again. Were you aware of this? I just. Ethan's voice cracked. I only adjusted it for clarity in messaging. By altering data? Douglas said softly. Do you understand what that means to investors? No one answered. Under the white lights, I saw sweat glisten on Ethan's forehead, mirrored by the screen. He was learning the lesson everyone in this field learns sooner or later. Truth cannot be edited. Douglas exhaled, nodded once. Let's take 10 minutes. He stood, voice cold. Ethan, step outside with me. The door closed behind them with a sound like a film reel being cut. No one spoke. One investor turned to me, whispering, Do you realize how far this could go? I only work with real data, I said. She nodded, a flicker of respect behind her concern. 10 minutes later, Douglas returned alone. He scanned the table, voice calm but razor sharp. It seems today's presentation contained multiple critical inaccuracies. We'll end it here. Clara, stay after. He left the room without another word. People gathered their papers, chairs scraping softly against the floor. Ethan didn't return. I picked up my cold coffee and walked past the dark screen. Its glossy surface reflected my face. Still, clear, metallic. I didn't feel triumphant, only lighter. Because finally, the truth didn't need me to speak for it. It had spoken on its own. The small conference room on the 33rd floor was silent like a glass tank. Light from the window split Douglas in two, half bright, half shadow, just like this meeting. Between us, the laptop screen was frozen on a still from that morning. Ethan's face caught mid-sentence. Douglas tapped a finger against the table. I want to hear it from you. I never edited a single line, I said. The files shown this morning aren't from my real system. The door swung open. Ethan entered with Vaughn, the head of IT. His tie was crooked, collar was damp with sweat. He dropped a stack of papers on the table, words tumbling over his own breath. Mr. Vale, she saved her files wrong. Every log points to a folder called CM Monroe Backup. She made it herself and never reported it. I only used what she stored. Douglas turned to Vaughn. Confirm it. Vaughn looked at his tablet, then nodded slowly. There is a CM Monroe backup on the server. Metadata shows it was created by user CM Monroe. Good. Ethan seized the moment. Then she's the problem here. I met his eyes. Any logs showing me accessing that folder from the executive network? The air thickened. Vaughn hesitated. Douglas frowned. What exactly are you implying, Clara? This, I said, turning my laptop toward them. I logged into the admin console. Lines of white text appeared, sharp as a blade. System log. User eval copied directory. C Monroe F files to #exec shadow at 2342 unauthorized terminal. Device fingerprint. EV MMB Pro 32A. Source. VA LAN. Executive. The room dropped into a different kind of silence, the metallic kind. Douglas leaned back, the reflection in his glasses hiding his eyes. Ethan, he said evenly. Explain. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it again. I thought I was allowed to use internal data. Her account had editorial access. Her account, Douglas repeated, each word like a nail. Do you have written authorization? He shook his head, barely. I saw his throat tighten around the sound he didn't make. I didn't misplace data, I said calmly. I detected a breach last week. Instead of sounding an alarm, I built a mirrored version to protect the originals. CM Monroe Backup looks 98% identical, but it can't be used to manipulate results. Ethan spun toward me. You set me up. I locked the door, I said. You walked through it. Vaughn cleared his throat and rechecked the logs. The access chain matches Ethan Vale's device fingerprint and the timestamp 2342 on the executive VLAN. No sign of Clara's terminal on that network. Douglas looked between us, then asked me, "Why didn't you report the breach immediately?" "I needed to see the scope," I said, "and I needed the truth to defend itself. If I shouted, it would become noise. But when the system speaks, it becomes evidence." Ethan slammed his palm on the papers. "You made me look like a fraud." "I didn't make you anything," I said evenly. "You became that when you moved a comma and flipped a chart. I just held up a mirror." Douglas closed the laptop halfway, his voice dropping to a blade's edge. "Vaughn, I want every access log for the past 3 weeks, from all devices, all subnets. Suspend Ethan's credentials now." "Yes, sir." Vaughn stood and left. 3 of us remained. The wind slid across the window pane with a thin, hollow tone. Ethan sat down, hands clasped so tight his knuckles blanched. "Dad," he whispered, eyes down. "I only wanted to help GVN. Her story, it was too negative. It hurt the brand." Douglas pressed 2 fingers to his temple, silent for several long beats. "You just used the word brand to describe a piece of journalism. Do you hear yourself?" Ethan flinched. I'm sorry." I said nothing. In my head, I could hear Leo's typing from last night, the metalog recording, every timestamp, steady as a heartbeat. Douglas turned to me. "If this reaches the press, I'll say exactly what you saw on the screen," I answered. "Nothing more, nothing less. Truth doesn't need editing." He gave a small nod, enough to tell me I'd cross back onto solid ground. "Clara, stay on this with me. We need to reset our protocols and boundaries." "I'm ready," I said. "And I have a proposal, an independent audit of internal access privileges, not just because of today." "Do it," Douglas said. "You lead it." Ethan shot to his feet. "You're suspending me? You're losing all access privileges until the board reviews the logs," Douglas replied, standing to close his laptop. "Now leave." Ethan froze for a second, then turned, gripping the door frame as if it were the only thing holding him up. The door closed with a sharp click, like a line striking through everything he'd presented that morning. Douglas didn't look back. "Regaining trust is harder than regaining ratings," he said, and left the room, the faint smell of fresh paper and a single crooked chair behind him. I stayed. The glass table reflected the ceiling lights. Cold, perfect, flat. I poured half a cup of coffee from the pot. The surface was dark, mirroring my own face. Still, steady, untriumphant. My phone buzzed. A message from Leo. "Metalog synced. Backup sealed." I typed back, "Leave as is. No interference." "Understood," he replied. I stood and walked down the long hallway, each fluorescent panel marking a step. At the end, the glass looked down over the city. Cars moved like tiny dots, unaware that on this floor, a story had just been stripped of its polish. Downstairs, a few employees looked up as I passed. Their eyes carried something mixed: curiosity, caution, a trace of respect. I stopped by the coffee machine, poured another sip. Bitter, grounding. Not victory. I sent Douglas a short email. Subject: what the system remembers. Attachment: audit outline, access control, logging, editorial review, ethics training. In the body, summary timeline attached. Before leaving, I opened my notebook and wrote, "Don't push anyone off the edge. Just turn on the light. Every truth has a pulse. Don't drown it with noise. Accurate timing equals justice." I closed the pen. The words I'd always lived by returned to me. When truth is stolen, your only job is to make sure it learns how to protect itself. Today, it did exactly that. 3 days after the meeting, the city felt quieter, as if the air itself had paused. Wind brushed against the broadcast antennas on the roof, making a brittle sound like ice scraping glass. I was back in the editing suite, where the donor files still sat untouched inside an encrypted drive. Video clips, audio files, testimonies, each one waiting to be seen. Ethan had been suspended. Inside GVN, chaos buzzed like a smoked-out beehive. PR sent an internal memo. All investigative content temporarily on hold. I read that line and almost laughed. No one said the truth was wrong. They just said it wasn't the right time. I opened the last video of Mrs. Lorna, the former lab technician at Vale Pharma. Her voice trembled but stayed firm. We warned them about the side effects, but they told us to change the wording, from liver damage to metabolic adjustment. I paused the frame. Her hands were clasped tightly, fingertips shaking, nails chipped. No, I couldn't let this die on a server. That night, the newsroom was empty. I came in at 10, carrying only a mint coffee and a small drive. Leo texted, "You sure about this?" "Sure," I replied. I logged into the offline editing network and extracted the original cut, outside GVN's content system. Then I opened an encrypted email window and typed the address of a small independent paper in Seattle, the Northline Journal, known for publishing stories the bigger outlets buried. In the subject line, I wrote, "The version that was never aired." I dragged the zip file, 3.2 gigabytes. Inside were the full report, interview logs, internal emails between Vale Pharma and GVN's PR, and the production journal. Before hitting send, I added one final line, sent by someone who still believes truth doesn't need PR. I looked at the clock, 11:42. At the same time, Ethan had broken in. I smiled. The circle had closed. 2 days later, Northline published the piece. No flashy graphics, no dramatic headline, just white letters on a gray page. The donor files. What GVN chose not to air. I was making coffee when my phone rang. Leo's voice trembled through the line. "You've seen it? It's everywhere." I opened my browser, shares spreading nonstop on Twitter, Reddit. Then the story hit the front page of Newsly. Hashtags followed. #TruthWithout, filter, #Val Pharmaleak, #GEN Integrity. People were furious. Donors from the donor health program felt betrayed. Doctors spoke out. The station's inbox flooded with messages. "Why did you hide this?" I just sat there watching. No joy, no fear. Only the feeling of a river finally clearing its own path. On the third morning, Douglas called me in. A printed copy of the Northline article lay on his desk, the first page marked in red. "You sent it?" he asked. I said nothing. He studied me for a long moment, then set his pen down. "I should be angry, but I can't. Everything in that piece is true. I only sent the version GVN approved before it was cut," I said. "I didn't add or remove a word." Douglas sighed, eyes drifting toward the window. "They'll investigate. Board, shareholders, lawyers. But I want you to know, I understand why you did it. I just did my job," I said. He nodded. "Maybe that's why we still have a chance to rebuild." By noon, the building buzzed again. A group of young reporters found me by the coffee bar. "You're the one who sent it, aren't you?" one of them asked, eyes bright. I shook my head. I just adjusted the light to its true color. They smiled, said nothing more. They understood. The story spread to major outlets. CNN replayed Lorna's interview. BBC subtitled it. From an anonymous source inside GVN. No one mentioned my name. Good. That night, I stayed late. The lights of the station glowed steadily but quietly. I opened the final cut one last time. My own voice filled the room, a recording from months ago. We can edit light, sound, and framing, but we cannot edit consequences. And in every program, no matter how many layers of review, one thing must never change: integrity. The timeline reached its end. The screen went dark. In the corner, a small message appeared. Playback finished. I turned on the desk lamp and wrote a few short lines in my notebook. Sometimes justice doesn't need a courtroom. Truth finds its way to the light if we don't stand in its way. No one owns the truth. We only care for it. I closed the notebook and slid it into the drawer. Outside, GVN's massive LED screen still blazed its slogan, GVN, we bring trust to news. The wind blurred the lights, as if even they felt ashamed. I didn't need my name mentioned. It was enough to know the real files had finally aired, intact, just as I built them. And somewhere, Mrs. Lorna, The woman who trembled as she told her story would know her voice had been heard. I shut down the computer, grabbed my coat, and walked toward the lobby. The rain was thin and cold. The digital board outside the building flickered with breaking news. Vale Pharma stock down 12%. Beneath it, a user comment read, "Finally, a network with someone still human." I smiled. Not a network, just a few people, and that's enough. Stepping outside, I looked up at the sky, pale and wide, as if freshly cleaned. The coffee in my hand was still warm. The world was still full of lies, but this small corner today had been set right. 3 months after the article, the winter wind swept through San Francisco, cold and clear like glass just cleaned. The Jeevan building was shrouded in fog, its old banners taken down. Douglas Vale had resigned. The press conference was brief, his voice rough but steady. "I take responsibility for every failure, including the ones I didn't stop." No one interrupted. After that, he left the city for Santa Fe to open a small center for young journalists. I read it in the paper. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't satisfied either. A chapter had closed in silence worthy of its ending. The network was restructured. The new slogan was shorter: GVN, we try. At least I thought they had the honesty to drop the word trust. I resigned. No farewell party, no speech. On my desk, I left a note. "The truth has aired. I've done my part." Life slowed after that. In the mornings, I walked along the shore, trading the sound of waves for the clatter of keyboards. Afternoons, I reread old books, finding new meaning in familiar lines. At night, when the city slept, I could still hear the faint echo of the editing room, the soft beep of a file finished exporting. The silence was strange, like my life had finally reset its rhythm. I thought it was over, until one rainy February afternoon. My phone buzzed with a message. "Clara, it's Ethan." I stared at the screen for a long time. Not angry, just feeling a low note inside, like a piano key pressed after years of dust. We met at a small cafe near the pier. He looked thinner, hair longer, confidence gone. No suit, just a dark coat and a rain-damp baseball cap. "Thank you for coming," he said. I only nodded. It took him a while to speak. "I've lost everything. My job, my friends, my name. My father won't speak to me. But the worst thing I lost is faith in myself. I stayed quiet. And now you want to take it back from me?" "No," he said softly. "I just wanted to apologize." I nodded slowly, not as forgiveness, but as acknowledgement that it took him this long to say it. He took a small notebook from his coat and placed it on the table. The cover read, in uneven handwriting, "What's left of the truth." "I want to make a documentary," he said. "Not to cleanse myself, but to find out what part of the truth survives after we've touched it." I smiled faintly. "And what will you use for that film? The files you once stole?" He lowered his eyes. "If you'll allow it." Outside the window, rain streaked down the glass, like lines of data being erased. "Fine," I said, "but under one condition. You use real files. No filters, no edits. Keep the noise. Keep the breath of real people. Only then will the audience know what truth actually sounds like." Ethan looked up. His eyes were tired but clear. "Deal." I studied him. Not the arrogant man he once was, but someone learning how to rebuild with bare hands. "You keeping that title?" I asked. "Yes." "What's left of the truth?" "Good title," I said, "because truth never disappears. It just waits for someone brave enough to reopen it." He held my gaze. "If there's a final voiceover, will you say that line?" "I'll think about it," I said. A few weeks later, he sent me the first draft. I watched it in my small apartment. The film opened with the old GVN building, then the editing room, where a woman adjusted audio levels. No name, no face. My voice played, a clip from the original broadcast. "We can edit light, framing, and even voice, but we cannot edit consequences." The screen faded to black. Then the text appeared, produced by Ethan Vale, with the files that once betrayed him. I sat still, not proud, just understanding that maybe our mistakes are the only path back to honesty. The premiere was small, held in an old theater in the Mission District. No banners, no marketing. When it ended, No one clapped. Only silence. The kind that follows a truth people already knew but had forgotten to remember. Ethan approached me. You still angry with me? I smiled. Angry? No. I stopped being angry the day the truth went on air. What about you? Forgiven yourself yet? He shook his head. Not yet, but I'm learning how. I left the theater as the city lights came on. The sky was silver gray, street lamps spilling gold across wet pavement. In a glass display, the poster hung slightly crooked. What's left of the truth? Below it, a small line read, For the one who believed that truth needs no PR. I looked at it for a long time and smiled. Not because my name was there, but because he finally understood. That night, I went home and opened the window. The wind from the bay carried salt and cold air inside. On the table, a half-finished cup of coffee reflected the streetlight's glow. I wrote in my notebook, Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's moving forward. Truth isn't a weapon. It's light. We don't have to be perfect to be right, just brave enough to be real. I closed the notebook. The darkness in the room no longer felt heavy. It was just a pause, waiting for the next light to appear. 1 year later, San Francisco lay under a soft veil of fog this morning. The city was still loud, but somehow gentler. I sat in my small apartment by the bay window. The coffee in my cup had gone cold, a thin layer of foam catching the first light of day. No deadlines, no 11 p.m. meetings, just me, the wind, and an old keyboard. Sometimes I still write for small independent outlets, pieces about the craft, about memory, about that fragile line between truth and branding. On the shelf, the DVD of What's Left of the Truth sat neatly beside my old notebook. The ink on its cover had faded. Truth doesn't need to be saved. It only needs to be remembered the right way. I opened my laptop. The screen lit up, revealing a familiar folder in the corner. Fake files. I thought I'd deleted it, but there it was, silent, harmless now, like a scar that no longer hurts, only reminds. I clicked it open. Inside were the mirrored fakes Leo and I had made. Wrong numbers, reversed graphs, clipped audio tracks. Each one a distorted reflection. At the bottom corner, a small line appeared. Last accessed, 11:42 p.m. I looked at the time and smiled faintly. 11:42, the hour he'd logged into my account. The hour everything began, and the hour I learned that silence can be the strongest form of resistance. I almost deleted the folder. The cursor hovered over delete. One beat. Then I changed my mind. I renamed it Archives of Light and pressed enter. Not to keep a victory, but because sometimes to move forward, you don't erase the past. You just rename it. The morning light passed through the window, glinting off the cold coffee and bending into a curved line across the table. I opened my notebook and wrote a few new lines. Truth never goes dark. Justice doesn't need noise. Tomorrow will be interesting, if we stay honest. My phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. Clara, the film got nominated for Documentary of the Year. Thought you should know. I typed back, Congratulations. Keep what's left of the truth bright. He replied with a single emoji, a yellow light bulb. I stared at it for a moment, then laughed quietly. A light. The world's way of repeating old lessons, only gentler this time. Outside, the wind swept past the docks. A ship's horn echoed from far away. I closed the laptop. The click sounded just like that night years ago, right before the fake files went live. But this time, there was no adrenaline, only peace. I took a sip of cold coffee and smiled. Sometimes justice doesn't need noise. It just needs the right person to log in. The dark screen reflected my face, not tense anymore, just softly lit in the eyes. In the corner, the folder named Archives of Light remained, quiet and patient, as if waiting for the next story. If you're still listening now and you still believe truth deserves to be protected, turn on your own light. Hit subscribe and help me keep that light alive. Because maybe the next story will be yours. Tomorrow's going to be fun.